Attention Delaware small business owners. If you're looking to grow in 2025, I encourage you to check out the Delaware Division of Small Business Edge Grant Competition. STEM companies can earn up to $100,000 and entrepreneur class companies up to $50,000. Applicants must employ 10 or fewer individuals, be majority located right here in Delaware, and have been in operation less than 7 years.
For more information, visit de.gov/edge.
Good day. There's a new policy shift coming out of Washington. It's complex, it's calculated, and if history is any guide, it's going to affect a lot more people than just the ones they're talking about on cable news. The Trump administration is rolling back initiatives designed to uplift historically marginalized communities. And while the headlines might frame this as an issue that only affects Black and brown Americans, the reality is much broader and much deeper. And if we're willing to be honest with ourselves, it's much more dangerous to the fundamental principles of equity and opportunity. This isn't about handouts, it's about access. It's about whether we continue to build a country that believes in expanding opportunities for all people, or whether we start drawing the lines a little tighter, making the door a little heavier and stacking the deck just a little higher against those who weren't born into privilege. And before you assume this doesn't impact you, let's remember something. When you take the rungs of the ladder from one group, you weaken the entire foundation for everyone. Today, we're joined by someone who knows the stakes better than most. Jennifer Thompkins, CEO of the Metropolitan Wilmington Urban League, is here to break down what's really happening and what's at risk. And what can be done to ensure that this rollback doesn't go unnoticed and unchallenged and uncorrected. Because the truth is, when the fight is framed as us versus them, the people making the rules are counting on us not realizing that at the end of the day, it's all of us who lose. This is the agenda. Let's get to it. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the agenda. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Thank you for paying attention on social media. We are noticing. Your comments are awesome, and we need them to keep coming. We need you to forward this out and pass this along to people across your platforms and let them know about what's going on here in Delaware and ensuring that not only their values, but their ideas are staying on the agenda right here in Delaware. So let's keep it going. We have Miss Jen Thompkins, CEO of the Wilmington Metropolitan Urban League, here to talk to us about so many things today. She is a regular guest here on the show, and we are excited to have her back. Miss Thompkins, welcome.
Oh, well, thank you. It's good to be back, Kerwin. So it's certainly good to be back.
I know you personally, I know your passion, and I know that this week is probably, the past 9 days.
Yeah.
Let's not just say this week.
Yeah.
Let's just say the past 9 days
Yeah.
have been not boring.
Not boring, have been in many ways disappointing, and just quite frankly, just, a little sad, right? And so I do believe, we're in a situation where we are ultimately mourning progress. And we can, those of us who know and, who know history, who love history, I am a historian, that's where my degree is in, and that's what I love. We completely understand what this rhetoric means, and the fact that this is taking us back almost 100 years.
Yeah.
A lot of what is being signed into order. And so, I never thought in my lifetime I would be living the same exact kind of injustices that my grandmother and my great-grandmother and great-great-grandmother were living, but we're here. Mm-hmm. We are here. And I will say the Urban League movement is ready to meet the moment.
I like that.
Mm-hmm.
I like the fact that you're ready to meet the moment, because I made it clear to all the guests on the show last night. We had the ACLU that was on the show.
Good friends.
And they were talking about some of the things that they were doing, and I made it clear to the public that there's no rest now.
No.
There's no rest now. There's very little complaining that needs to happen. We need to be active. reactive. We need to get in here and get it done and do it without excuse. So when I hear that there's groups like the Urban League that's saying, okay, we're ready to work.
Yeah.
That's what we need right now. There's no time for tears. It's time to roll up our sleeves and figure things out. The part that worries me.
And I will also say this, Kerwin, is that not only are we ready to meet the moment, but we've been ready, right? A lot of there were rumblings of this even during the Biden administration of knowing exactly, Project 2025 and those, right, that were coming, right? We're coming through the ranks, and the Urban League movement has been on the forefront and has been extremely vocal about a lot of that, particularly around the critical race theory, right? We were definitely there on the front lines with that. The exclusion of Black history in many of state curriculums, right? And fortunately, here in the state of Delaware, we were able to pass legislation that would ensure that all school districts include Black history in their curriculum. And we're working with certain civil rights organizations in the state to ensure that that actually becomes a reality in every single district. But the Urban League has been ready, right? We were founded in 1910, and we have been ready since 1910. And so in the midst of being ready, I will say we also practice relaxation and joy at times, because I will tell you, as a freedom fighter, you never rest, to your point, right? It's never an ending. And I always like to quote my famous, my favorite, and she is famous, Coretta Scott King, where she says, victory is never really won. It must be won and fought in every generation, right? But we understand that. And so that's why we stay ready. And again, we are ready to meet this moment locally and also nationally.
So what are some of the things that you all are working on right now? I know DEI is a hot topic for a lot
Very
of folks.
much so.
And what I believe, what I have found to be true is that a lot of people don't understand what it is. So before we're talking about why we should be outraged about the rollback, especially within the federal government, I made it clear to people that and some folks that I spoke to, is they say, well, it's just the federal government. It doesn't have to do with my company. And I said, well, a lot of companies use and a lot of businesses use what the federal government does as a primer, right? So it's their actions that justify those actions. The second thing that I said is, if you notice in your company that these things are rolling back and that there being a lack of funding, then you know where you stand in that company.
Very much so. It's about values.
It's about values, right? So you know, if you had any question about where you stand, and these aren't liberal tears that I'm crying, so you can stop with those comments. What I'm saying is, okay, cool. Just let me know the rules. Yeah. Just let me know the rules. And so now I know the rules and I understand where I stand, then I can make other moves.
Yeah. But I will also say this too, Kerwin. Good sister Kimberly Kershaw, talked about this, is that DEI, right, is just one piece of an entire system in which is, there are folks out there who want to dismantle, right?
Oh, yeah.
When we look at the language, when we look at the executive orders, all 300 and some that have come out, and when you get a chance.
Well, as of right now, because. Oh,
that's true. This is literally a minute by minute play. It could be 500, right? And so, as we look at this, all of these roll back to a pre-Reconstruction America.
They're making it very clear.
There's no mistake about this, right? And so I think, what we have to, because we are sometimes a society that gets caught up just in buzzwords like DEI or any of those, or any of the other ones, right? Yes, those are a part of the narrative, but understanding what the overall narrative is. The overall narrative is that pre-Reconstruction America, that's the America in which we want, right? And my history book says, right, that the majority of African Americans
did not fare well.
There you go, right? Even, my immigrant community, right? Those who, even some European communities, right, did not fare well pre-Reconstruction. So when you say this is just not about Black and brown, you are absolutely right. The poor did not fare very well pre-Reconstruction, right? And so we are literally fighting a system. A couple of nights ago, great documentary on PBS by my former professor, Henry Louis Gates, called Great Migrations, right? It's a 4-part series, but he talks about the Great Migration and this idea of movement, right? And so in the Urban League, we call ourselves a movement. And I often say we are a movement and not just a moment. But again, and this movement was formed in 1910, and it was formed as a reaction or as a consequence of the Great Migration. And for those who don't know, the Great Migration is the largest, let me hear this out, the largest internal migration in the history of the world. Why were African Americans fleeing the South and going north? One, for better job opportunities, right? But the other thing is because of racial terror. They were ready to get out of these racial terror communities. Now, we also know, know the history, that just moving from one community to the next did not dissipate racial terror, right? But understanding that I could go to the Chicagos, the Philadelphia, the New York, at least have a shot, right, of being successful, right? At least have a shot of my children being able to go to school and not be harassed, at least having a shot about building generational wealth. That's what the Great Migration did, right? But there's also this other part of the Great Migration which we cannot undermine. It's this idea of movement. We need to also understand that movement, the idea of movement, right? The idea and the agency of picking up your belongings, or even just taking yourself and moving hundreds of miles away, how empowering that is, right? How much, you are given agency by that. So when I look back at these executive orders, right, which are moving children back to countries in which they fled, right, which are putting in place things that will remove social services out of our communities, right, I think about movement. And so what this overall system is attempting to do is to prevent movement. And when you prevent movement, think about the last time when we prevented movement here in the United States of America. It looked very much.
COVID.
There you go.
So I want to stay there for a second. Okay. So when we're talking about the prevention of movement, especially during the COVID era, I think of 2020 and I think of the social impact of 2020.
There you go.
Okay. And I want to be clear to our audience, my opinion in regards to that. I have never, out of my 47 years of life, I never saw movement in regards to equity, in regards to we're not going to take it anymore than that. We did more, I think, in a matter of weeks in regards to legislation and standing up for what we're not going to stand up for anymore than I think they've done in the past 40 years. We're at a point where they had to have extra sessions and bring people in from our legislation to figure out what the heck, the country is mad. Now, I think that we'll be very close to that in about 3 months.
I agree. But I will also say this too. When we think about COVID, the movement, and certainly even DE&I practices that came out of that, right, or adoptions that came out of that, and commitments.
But bringing it to the forefront.
Right, it was, but we have to realize here, it was also a sacrifice. It was a sacrifice of a gentleman called George Floyd, right?
Oh, yeah.
It was a sacrifice of many others. It was a sacrifice of a young girl who, because she had her cell phone out and recorded the whole thing, right, and her life being threatened afterwards, that's how we got into this movement. And so where I'm at, and as freedom fighters, right, we never want movement to also be a causation of loss or sacrifice. And it shouldn't have to be, right? And so what I do fear with a lot of these things that are happening, yes, we are on the brink of something that is getting ready to happen, and possibly it will not be good.
But is that scripted to happen? Are the events that may happen, are they pushing them to that because that's what they want?
I cannot speak to. I cannot speak to. I'm not a member of the Trump administration. I have no idea what the thought process is, because to me right now, for those, and again, the Urban League, we are not, we do not endorse any candidates, right? But it seems to me that the folks who were extremely Trump supporters, right? And some of our folks who, may live in underserved communities, but were, Trump supporters, these executive orders are hurting them as well.
And that's what.
So that's why I said, I don't know what the reason behind.
They think that Appalachia won't be affected by the end of federal grants being halted from a population that is struggling, and they are people, right, that are affected by addiction. They are people affected by. You talk about poor Americans.
Yeah.
You talk about poor Americans, you talk about the South. And these aren't Americans that look like me. We're only 13% of the population. So let's cut the crap.
I mean, poor Americans, we can, roll into any one of our states, right? Any one of our cities, and we see this, right?
Now this is the
no
other
one
part.
is exempt.
This is the other part. When we're talking about, I was thinking about this morning, when we're talking about all the, again, with the Blue Lives Matter, and I love police officers. They understand my role in law enforcement, but they are ending federal grants that pay for police officers.
Oh, absolutely.
A lot of people don't understand that, especially in your smaller towns that you love and your flags and all this, half of that is paid by the municipality, half of that is paid by the state, or half of it is paid by the federal government through a grant. Through a grant. So if you think that law enforcement is not going to be affected by this, I have news for you, they will be. If you think teachers aren't going to be affected by this, they will be. And so many of the other essential services that you pride yourself on, you can pride yourself on that by having them over for dinner, because they may not be able to pay for groceries in the next month or so because their paychecks are gone or their jobs are gone. So please do not think that this only affects a certain group of people. And you know what? I don't even blame you if you think that way, because you've been programmed to think that way and you haven't been given the proper data and the proper information. But just to be clear, now you do, and it's not hard to find. Jen, I got to get off this soapbox. I don't know what's...
Well, I mean, I think we bring up an overall, I would say, American problem, right? In that, we don't do a good job in America of learning from history. Somehow, like our other countries in the world do. We don't do a good job at it. And we don't do a good job about being honest about our history. And I think it's because, and I don't know the reason why. I can't begin to kind of surmise that. But what I do believe is that if we start, right, really understanding, acknowledging our history as a nation, these things won't be allowed to happen. Because what is happening now is taking us back. I can't say it enough, right? It is taking us back. And it's moving so fast, and that's the intentionality of it, to your point. It's moving so fast before you can blink, before those, to your point, can get the information, understand the information, right? It's going so fast that we can't even, that folks can't keep up. Right. Folks cannot keep up. And so imagine not being engaged, right? I sit every day with CNN. I have that as my background noise, right? So I'm constantly seeing this 24/7.
Which is unhealthy.
It's not good. It's not good. But I do this also to keep my finger on the pulse, right?
It's part of the job.
It's part of the job. It's honestly my passion, right? And what I also do too, I have a responsibility just not to the Urban League and to my job, but I also have a responsibility to my community and to my family, right? To be able to educate them as well, to say, this is what's happening. This is why we have to pay attention, right? This is what this is going to affect. Getting information out to folks. But again, it's intentional. It's moving super fast so folks cannot keep up, and folks will get fatigued, right?
Absolutely.
It's like the Washington's defense on a Sunday, getting fatigued.
Getting fatigued and just not showing up to the game.
Just not showing up to the game, right?
Oh, well.
That's the tactic, yeah.
We'll have a Go Bird segment after this.
There you go.
But I also think that it's important to understand that a lot of folks can't comprehend what's going on.
Yeah.
The fact that you talk about yourself and being up to date on everything that's going on, that's taken work, one, and that's not something that you just started doing last week, right?
That's very true.
So these issues, and I'm not downing Americans in regards to their ability to comprehend, but they are fairly complex. And if you haven't been keeping up with them and you're unaware of what's going on, it's easy just to watch it go by, right?
Yeah.
And before you know it, before you know it, not only are you affected, but you may have had an opportunity to do something about it and you didn't, right?
Yeah.
I think a lot of folks truly don't understand deeply how it's going to affect them.
No.
They don't, and before they do, or when they do, it may be too late. But, underline, that's when I believe the country, it's amazing what we can do when we stand up together. Mm-hmm. When we stand up together as one unified source and say we're not going to take it anymore, the amount of progress and in the short amount of time it can happen.
Yeah.
And when we have people that are nothing will get you motivated more than poverty. I mean, there's a lot of things out there that'll motivate people, but when you can't afford things and when you're hungry and your kids are hungry and when you're like, I can't believe I've allowed myself to get into this situation, that's when true motivation for change, I think, happens. I believe that's when it happens. And then I know that the last thing that certain administrations want is for us to be unified. They can say, oh, this is for the betterment of everyone, but that's a bunch of bull. The last thing they want is for folks to get together and say, you know what? Oh, it's hard for you too? Oh, it's hard for me too. This affected you? Oh, it affected me too. Yeah, my grandmother can't go to this hospital anymore because they don't have enough federal funds to keep the doors open. Oh, really? My grandmother can't deal with prescriptions anymore because they rolled back Medicaid and Medicare and all these other things. Oh, well, my parents can't live on their own anymore because they're trying to get rid of Social Security and they needed that to live. It isn't until we have all those conversations and you start to look at each other and you're like, oh, this is affecting everybody.
Yeah. But I think, again, this goes back to making sure these things are in a curriculum, right? And ensuring that young people from elementary school, there's civics that are put back into our school because folks just don't understand the system, right? And so in the interconnectedness with all of this. But I would also say this is also, you know, what we've seen in the last couple of days. And there was a glimpse of what I like to call those glimpses of glory in where we talk about the vote and voting for the right candidate. You know, we have or voting just period for your interests. We had, you know, one person who we had the Trump administration who put forth these executive orders, right? But then you had a judge, a federal judge, who came through and who put a freeze on the freeze, essentially.
Right.
You know, when you go down and you read a little bit more about that federal judge was appointed by the Biden administration. And so it's just not about who sits in the president's seat, right? It's also all the other seats as well. And then, you know, we can see something like this if it's not resolved going all the way to the Supreme Court. So it's also those Supreme Court justices. And again, that goes back to who we put in the president's seat, right? And so again, the Urban League, we do not endorse candidates. However, we do endorse our interests. And clearly in the 2024 election, there were candidates who were very much for the freedom and equality and justice of America, and there were candidates who were not. And I would just leave it like that. But, you know, I will also say just on this last front with DEI, you know, when we think of the at its core, and for anyone who's listening, right, DEI is leveling the playing field. That's exactly what it is, right? And so for too long, America has not been a country that has lived up to its creed, right? And so DEI was a step in a direction to really live up to equity, justice, right? And so now when you have that attack, what are we saying about the country in which we live in?
Right. And people may not realize, if you're not working in those environments, when you level the playing field, businesses make more money.
They do. They make way more money.
This isn't some liberal propaganda. This is facts. They make more money, which benefits you and so many other parts of your lives. I got news for you. Target, good luck.
Well, that's what I was getting ready to say. I don't know if the numbers have come in, but really with them making such a huge shift the way they did.
Good luck.
Good luck, yeah.
You have a lot of people that have benefited from DEI programs as folks that are selling to your store, that are buying from your store. that are in the promos to your store. And you have just said it's not important to us anymore. I don't know. Jen, it's going to be interesting. Something tells me that you'll be on again real soon.
And I completely welcome that. I just encourage, again, all the audience, please, anything that you can get your hands on to read history-wise, please do. Because again, this is really going to be a fight of those who truly are aware of what's going on. And like I said, it's going really fast. But knowing the history and essentially what this rhetoric looks like helps us to continue to understand exactly where this administration is moving towards.
Well, they're making it clear.
Yeah.
Last night, President Trump has given a deferred retirement or deferred pension to a lot of federal employees and giving them an opportunity to basically leave the federal government with 8 months of severance and a couple other things. That is to slow the government down. That is to slow the government down. So I'm very interested to see where that's going to go. I'm very interested to see how many people take advantage of that. And I'm very interested to see you right here next time on the agenda. Thank you, Ms. Thompkins. Thank you for watching. Be sure to comment and put in information down there and tell us how to get in contact with you. We would love to have the conversation continue. Look forward to seeing you all next time right here on the agenda.